Yeah.
You said that was a road coming in.
That's right. So we're at the east end of the village, which runs east-west, and it butts on to where the old road up Strathnaver went. And you can see the green of it there. Goes through where the gate is now. They've put that gate because of that track. Right. And this longhouse that we're looking at, number 15 on the map,
so this is right. This is a longhouse here.
This is about two. This is a long house. There's maybe two families in this. But they also had blacksmiths here, and shoemakers and things like that. They were part of the community. And that one, number 16, that's a corn kiln. There's actually 2 corn kilns in this complex here. And they were very important because then they'd harvest their bare meal, their barley. You had to scorch it or it would germinate.
Right.
And this was great if you wanted to make whiskey or beer, but not good if you wanted to make bread later on in the year. So you wanted to make bread, you had to scorch the grain in these fantastically sophisticated, but rather dangerous because they used to go and find installations.
So
beautiful
that's
dry
actually
steam.
a kiln. That pile of stones is a kiln.
That is a kiln, and we could walk over to it now, because
Through the longhouse.
Through the longhouse, and you can see where there was a door between where the humans were at that end and the cattle were at this end. But there's 3 sections in it, so somewhere in there would be the smithy. Although they would all do their own blacksmithing, you know, in each family. This is quite a complex corn kiln because there's another building at the bottom there, and you have to adjust your eye because of the strong sunlight, but if you look in you'll see this lovely dry stone work inside it. So it's like a big cauldron made of dry stone. And they've got, there would have been a door there, a wooden door, and like a window and a ledge. And they were conical, they looked like Red Indian teepees actually. And they quite often went on fire. Because what they did was they got the black peat, which is the deepest peat, and you can make charcoal with it and make iron swords and everything out of it with charcoal. But also it had very little smoke, and they would get the best black, deepest cut peat and they stacked it up in this place here, and they would burn that, and it wasn't so smoky, and the hot air, there's a flue there, the hot air went up through that, trying to keep away the fire separate from where the grain is. That's just, they don't want the grain to burn. The kiln could burn, they could rebuild it the next day, but don't burn the grain. And they had a wicker work mat, and the hot air went up through that, and they scattered the grain over that, and one guy was at the door putting it in, and each family would bring the grain that they'd harvested at that point. Bit bare barley. It didn't grow corn. Corn didn't grow in these northern latitudes in those days. So later on it did, but not then. And another chap standing here, and he would scoop it out once the hot air had scorched it, put it into another bag, and then give it to them.
Right.
And this was a circular thing that went on and on and on. And this was the men's house. The other one's exactly the same. They would be sitting here discussing politics and smoking a pipe and getting a month-old newspaper and arguing about Napoleon, because, you know, just before the time of the clearances, because all the men that were away fighting Napoleon, and this, that, and Wellington, and all the things that were happening in the outside world. And the women were down on the foreshore there on that little beach, and they were washing the clothes, and that was the women's room.
Right.
And they made things like bus stops that they sort of were shelters with a bit of a roof, and they could hang the washing underneath that if it was raining all the time to dry.
Okay.
But quite often they would lay out the washing on the whin bushes or the gorse bushes in the sun if it was a lovely day like today, and that would bleach them.
Move round a wee bit.
Yes, sure. Now, somewhere about here, there's a complex of, I think there's an earlier corn kiln or something like that, or where the smithy was.
Right.
And so he would have his anvil and everything. So, this is the factory area, the manufacturing area of the village. That stone must have some significance, and this big stone as well. Watch yourself. Went to 17. This is a small house, but it's an annex. This is an annex. I think this is where the blacksmith lived.
Right.
Actually, it might have been a blacksmith, and that's all his cattle in there. And this area where the opposite door, that was where they made milk and cheese.
Right.
Well, you know, I say milk, they would be making stuff like crowdie and then turning it into cheese and things like that.
Was that just for eating or for selling as well?
Passing people, they could go up to Betty Hill and maybe sell it, I suppose. Yeah, because it would keep quite well, and it was a great delicacy. But that kind of work was going on all the time, you know. Everything was being recycled. So we've already passed, just on that one little walk, we've passed about 8 or 9 longhouses, some of them very big, you know. There's another path you see on the other side, so you can go right round in a complete circle. And in the middle you've got all the gardens with other buildings round them.
So the houses would have been right round the edges and then the garden bit.
They're set like that in making compounds, and this is a very old way. If you were in medieval Scotland, you would have seen houses set out in these patterns. Slightly different style of houses, but if you went up in the upland areas, they'd be made of turf just the same here. You know, they're only beginning to recognise them now because you can see them from the air. They always thought they had to be made of dry stone, you see, like the dikes, whatever. But no, nobody's going to waste all that.
Mainly be vegetables and.
Well, yes, they had kale, which is fantastically nutritious, and in fact they even had a special kale that came from Curtamy kale. Right. And they lost the seeds of that. Somebody had it in a drawer and they got lost.
This point, number 14. Right the way along is one house.
The one long group of, it's like terraced houses sort of thing. One leads into the other, at least 3 houses, and probably one family, I would think. They must have all been an extended family. And the best view in the village, right beside the loch. And for the women that was enormously important because they could go down and wash the clothes. They were right there, fresh water. They only had to carry water in a bucket.
Would they drink from this loch?
That's the only source of water. If they wanted to get absolutely fresh, they could find a burn where it was sparkling and running over stones up on the hillside after rain and things like that. Right,
this long house, would it have had any animals in it? Because there's no downward slope.
This is an interesting thing. Unless they had the animals in the middle and there were 2 sections, there's actually, it curved round. So they kind of overlap. And how they managed to do that, we don't need archaeology. There looks like a proper wall there between those 2, so that would stop effluent going down from if there was cattle here.
There's not a downward slope on this.
Yeah. So they might have had a sort of common sewer running underneath the whole lot of it. Interesting, but
maybe it was the elite and they didn't share with the animals.
I think so, that they're halfway between the 2 corn kilns as well. There's the big one over there, and then the blacksmith and all his guys are down at that end. Maybe there was uppies and downies in the village, you know.
Yeah. Where's the garden would be on the inside?
There's one up there and one there. There's 3 of them really that are sort of like big fried eggs. Yeah. And again a massive stone there.
Backs again, but
yes. A particular one, you can see the remains which have faded away of a longer house that this once was. with the cattle down there. But this bit here is what we call a granny house. And these were generally slightly set aside, and the elderly would be living in there, just close to their children who are living in that great long one there below. And the old granny would be in there, and the old granddad maybe. And they wouldn't be keeping cattle in that way, so that has kind of collapsed a wee bit. And there's another long one running right down there, and that is a garden. And another long house up there.
You're standing in the garden?
On the edge of it, yeah. And it had a fail dyke made of turfs and stone in between, interleafed. And the young kids would keep the horses from getting in, or the cattle. The horses could jump in.
Right.
And they had nettles in there, and making nettle soup, because nettles was a massive supply of, but it was a delicacy, you see. They said, oh, nettles! They were living like animals. This is nonsense. Nettle soup is beautiful, actually. But, I mean, it doesn't sting you or anything, it just has a nice sort of taste. And bare barley growing. And they would also keep the stacks with the straw. Right. At the edge of the settlement, this again is garden, sort of extended, but it looks as though there's little walls in amongst it. That's another house there, and then this is the path that runs all the way back up to where the interpretive plaque is. Right. So everything's within that path. And this is going back to the way it was probably about 1819, marshland, you know, occasionally flooded. And the waters from the mill, there were several mills up that stream running, and they would dam it up at the top and let the water down, just as they did in Shetland, when they wanted to grind the corn. So these little mills were the horizontal mill wheel, which whizzed around like an airplane propeller. And so the corn which they'd had scorched in the corn kiln, they would then take when they wanted to make bread later on, and they'd all take it and they'd let the water out, and they all had their sacks of corn. And these horizontal mills were actually doing the work that women had done with the top stone by hand. Right. So all they did was say, oh, we could get water to do that, we'll put a stone with propeller blades sticking out on it, flat boards. The Vikings, they simplified it, and the water comes down straight, falls about 6 feet, turns that, grinding merrily away, and the top stone, with it gearing and everything. They were very clever, and they were called click mills because they had a hopper on the top of it and a piece of wood that went round with the rotating stone, and it would hit it and go click, 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 click. And each time it did that, a handful of grain would go into the hole in the middle and go in and be ground. Wow. Fantastic. Yeah. Right. And the Mill was actually up at Skelpick, where Telford's house is.